Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm here in my home in lovely Ligonier, Pennsylvania. Hopefully, you all have been having a good start to your week so far. If you didn't see William's video yesterday, he had a really lovely update about the website. And if you saw, then you might have noticed that there's a sale going on, and hopefully, you all will take advantage of that as well. Um, he also did a fun kind of challenge, a creative challenge where he took things from around the store and put them together. Hopefully, that was a nice little bit of inspiration for you all and kind of show the inventory in a different way. Sometimes when we show things, we just show you, here's this, if you want to buy it. But sometimes I think it helps to put things in context. So it was a nice kind of experiment. You might have noticed that I'm not maybe um, as effervescent as usual. I had a really bad case of food poisoning and a migraine over the weekend. So I'm probably at like 90% here. But, you know, we got to do what we got to do. So, yeah. So I'm feeling a little bit better, actually, a lot better. And I thought I would give you a progress report on the 100 series. That started off to be a quick kind of fundraiser so I could take a class with Stephen Yusko at the Center for Metal Arts and get some new equipment for Star Cottage Studio. And it's kind of grown, and part of that is because I was out for a couple days and wasn't able to work um, on anything. So I've been trying to noodle away on things and get a little bit done here and there. To be perfectly 100% transparent, um, I wasn't 100% certain on the direction that I was going with this series. I knew that I wanted to do um, this series, and I kind of had some ideas, but I think the only way to kind of figure things out is to do them. And so, yeah, so I tried to figure some things out, and some things worked and some things didn't work. But I think I've settled on a direction. I'm pretty sure since I put a dent into these, what the direction is. So I'm going to show you what I've been working on, and I'm going to show you some collaging techniques, and I'm going to show you some painting techniques. All right. If you're watching, say hello and where you're tuning in from. It's always nice to see, where everybody is watching. Sometimes you can make some local friends when you see that your internet friends are not far. Um, all right. I see a couple people are watching. William would probably remind me that if you like these videos, to please like and share. Um, it helps boost the signal, and it definitely helps all small businesses as they kind of navigate the internet. Bonnie says, "Hi, Andrew. Glad you're feeling better." Yeah, I'm feeling better, but still, I haven't been eating very much because it kind of um, I don't know. I guess it's like a PTSD thing, but where I just haven't, my appetite hasn't fully returned. And so I kind of feel maybe a little bit shaky because um, I haven't been eating as much as normal, which may be good for, I don't know, some things, but um, Yeah. Marianne says hi. Hey, Marianne. Um, Marianne says, love the playtime yesterday. Oh, good. I'm glad that people seem to enjoy it. William didn't know if that was a good idea or not. I think because I don't know, we're so used to new everything, brand new, this just in, brand new, latest and greatest. And so we kind of feel this pressure, even though we know that people don't always see all the videos. We feel this pressure to have like the latest, greatest, newest, bestest thing ever. But in reality, you know, not everybody can see things all the time. So, also, like he said in the video yesterday, sometimes you may see something, but it may not resonate with you at that time, you know? So, I think it's one of those things where, it's not a bad thing to show things multiple times, but I think it is a good thing to switch things up and maybe show things in a different context. Or, you don't always get to see things, especially like when they're static on the internet. Um, like, for instance, the wood pendants, you can see maple, you can see, there's maple, there's walnut, there's cherry, but sometimes when there's one picture and then there's another picture and then there's another picture, you don't always get that you don't always see that difference. And uh, I think seeing it live in the video is helpful because then you can kind of see those differences, and you can see it in motion. So I think it was a good thing and something that we'll probably try to do some more of, hopefully. Amanda's watching. Hi, Amanda. Teresa's watching. Hey, Teresa. Norma's watching. Hey, Norma. Um, Jumped. Donna's watching. Hi, Donna. Amanda says, William has good design ideas. Yeah, I think we all do. Um, and it's nice when we can kind of work collaboratively. Whether or not something gets done or not, I think it's always good to get those different ideas and aesthetics, and you can learn a lot. That's one of the perks of coming in the store, is that you have somebody there who can show you, kind of help guide you through that process of finding things and putting them together. So that's definitely a perk, um, if you come into the store. But not everybody can come into the store. So this is kind of like the next best thing. And I think it's always fun to see like where people are coming from their creative perspectives and what resonates with them and what doesn't. Um, I found it really fascinating. So hopefully people enjoyed that. Lorraine is watching. Hey, Lorraine. Jan's watching. Hey, Jan. Long time no see. So yeah, we've been busy. On Friday, we went to the opening. It's called at Contemporary Craft, and that was a lot of fun. It featured the work of Matt Lambert and Erica Diamond. Um, and I wanted to go to, there was a talk the next day on Saturday, but I woke up and I had this terrible, terrible, terrible headache. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll push through it. And sometimes my headaches I get with weather related stuff. So I was like, well, maybe if the weather passes, but it didn't pass. And then I made some questionable choices with food. And that's where lightning kind of struck in an unfortunate way. Um, but I'm feeling better now. And William took care of me, and I drank a lot of Pedialyte, and I felt like a little kid. But it is what it is. Um, Cheryl says hi, and the website looks fantastic. Oh, good. Yeah, so William has been working in the background on updating the website for a while now. And it was definitely, it's interesting how things evolve with a website and how things kind of grow and change. And I see pictures of our first website, and I'm like, whoa, how things have changed so much. And yet there's still things that kind of remain the same. Um, for a while, when we were in our first location, our store had these tin ceilings and tin walls, and um, it had this tin wainscoting, and the tin wainscoting was painted this kind of metallic slate, and the upper part was this kind of blue color, and all the furniture was like dark wood or wood or painted black, and it had a very kind of moody, kind of goth kind of vibe, a little bit, not too much, but it was kind of there. And so when that translated into the website, the first incarnations of the website, um, I mean, I remember the color that I wanted wasn't available, so we had to go with this teal color, which was also nice. But then we had this kind of dark and moody website, and we also had a black background for text. And one of the things we realized, it was really hard to see, and it would like strain your eyes after a while. I don't know if any of you remember that website or not. It'd be fun to kind of go through the years with us through um, our virtual presences, as they were. But eventually we moved into another space, and we were feeling lighter and fresher. And that kind of morphed into the website also. And we started having a brighter website and made the pictures a little bit more dramatic. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's always an evolution. And I think as a good small business, we're always tasked to listen to our customers. And, you have to take things with a grain of salt, of course, but I think it's good to keep an ear open, or an ear to the ground, or however you want to put it, and kind of listen to that feedback, so that if somebody says, oh, well, the pictures on your website are really small, maybe you can't do anything about it at that exact moment, but that kind of sticks in your brain, and eventually you can modify it. Also, if you remember the early days of the internet, with like Angel Fire websites and things like that, you can see the very different aesthetics of how websites kind of function. At one point, Flash was a big thing, and you had all these animations and doing all this stuff. And then it went almost to the opposite side of that, where everything was very stark and very line formatted. And so everything kind of evolves. And I think um, that is reflected in consumer taste as well. So, like, if you have a very outdated looking, feeling website, um, it it can be a deterrent, I think. And because I know I've been on websites where, um, I'm not going to say who, but I just was on a website where it was so outdated, and it was almost painful to shop with them. And so I think one of those things is staying current, is kind of keeping on top of trends, and even just the formats of things, and changing small little things helps. And so I hope people like the new website. It's been a big labor of love. Mostly William doing it, because me, I just kind of, oh, I like this, I don't like this, can you make this bigger? Can you make this smaller? And usually he can anticipate the things that I'm going to say in regards to the design. So, so that's helpful. I mean, we've been together for long enough. Um, Donna says, I think we are all at different levels. Always good to do repeats. Jan says, you're always evolving, which is good. Yeah, I think that's one of those things where, for me personally, I'm always in a state of transition with my practice and my skill levels and what I want and the things that are important to me. And those things can then are reflected in the store and how we do things and how we present things and how and where we present them. So, I think it's a natural thing. And Donna, one of these days I'm gonna meet you. I know William has spoken very highly of you, and that you've been coming into the store lately. Um, there's maybe some talks of me coming into the store more regularly. I think once we get Butcher Block open, um, then we can and get that kind of sorted out. Then I can kind of have a regular schedule. But until we kind of do that, we're kind of stuck in this weird limbo. And so, and I don't know if they want me back at this store, honestly, because I'm pretty, maybe I shouldn't say this, but y'all may have figured it out. I'm sometimes a little bit bossy. But so you never know. That could be good. We haven't changed up the window in a while. I'm just saying. So, Marianne says, haven't had a chance to look at the updated website. Well, if folks get a chance, we would definitely appreciate it. And like most things, if you find something that's glaringly wrong, we would appreciate a heads up so that we can, not have problems. So that's www.allegorygallery.com, and the website address is up there. If you're like, I don't know how to spell that. Amanda says that she checked it out briefly and it looks great. I like it. I think the pictures are bigger, which was super important to me. And one thing that I would love to do, and that I desperately hope we can do at some time in the near future, is carve out sometimes to show some of the different finishes for the Allegory Gallery Fine Pewter line. And we had our friend took the pictures for the first wave, and they only took pictures of one finish. But I would love to get pictures in every finish so that people don't really have to guess so much. They'll know. Because I'd really like that to take off. There are so many different companies that that produce components, and this is kind of one of our side hustles, and I feel like we haven't really pushed it as far as we could. um, you know so that's something that we're working on in the backgrounds, and as things get a little bit more robust, then we'll be able to start manufacturing. And just so you know, manufacturing on a larger scale is kind of a pain in the butt. And I don't know if you know this or not, but it's a pain in the butt. We had a thing a while ago where we were going to produce a line. And when we got things back, they were all messed up and things were too thin and too flimsy, and you could just snap things off. Or one thing, it came and it was slid over in the mold, and there was a lot of flashing. And some of them you had to order 1,000 at a time. And so there was a lot of kind of troubleshooting with that. So hopefully we've kind of been talking to a couple different people and we're narrowing things down. So hopefully we'll be able to get the production on that up and running. But that's another, I hate to say that's another problem for another day, but it's kind of a, you know, it's it is, it is what it is. Marion says, at least the finishes seem the same from item to item. Yeah, they do. The platers did a really good job at keeping that consistent. I think, though, it's nice to be able to see what a piece actually looks like, because sometimes it's hard to kind of visualize it when you don't know. Especially if somebody's not, if somebody's new to making jewelry, or they feel like they're maybe not as creative as some other people, then it's good to have that, make it easily accessible so that people can see those. I would love to go through and have somebody do all the accessibility tags for the website, but that is a big, big, big project. And we're pretty maxed out at capacity now. My hope is that we'll find somebody local to help out at the shop on maybe Sundays and Mondays. And that would be such a nice thing to have that, so that we can have a little bit more flexibility with our filming schedule, and also maybe give William a day off. Wouldn't that be something novel? I don't know. Maybe he likes to work. But when it's wintertime and there's not a lot of extra money, then you kind of have to do what you have to do. So, there's always a reason why things are done a certain way. All right. So hopefully y'all are doing well out there and that this is a good start to your week so far. I'm going to jump into it, right? Unless there's anything else we should talk about. I don't know. If you haven't taken advantage of this sale, let me see if there's a banner for the sale. Oh, there is. I just added the ticker at the bottom, and there's a sale going on right now. It's called New Site, and you can save 20% on everything on our website. And if you spend over $100 in the US, you get free shipping. So I think that's a pretty good deal. I know I would like free shipping on over $100. There's so many things, like when we order stuff, like the shipping, I'm like, they like, I don't know, giving them a massage and giving them little Perriers on the way or something. All right. Bonnie, so they grabbed some last night. It's nice to get a sale. Oh, good. Yeah, we don't do a lot of sales, mostly because we try to price our stuff as low as possible. So whenever we do a sale, it sometimes is hard for us because, we eat that extra expense or that discount. But at the same time, we like to reward our customers for their loyalty, and to say thank you, and hopefully generate new business, and try to grow our community. So it's a nice little enticement to join in on the fun. I know some people, they have sales all the time. Like I can't even keep up with some of the folks. They have a sale every day. Oh, it's Taco Tuesday. We're gonna have a taco sale. And it's Hump Day Wednesday, and this day, I don't know. Yeah, so I can't keep track of them, and I definitely 100% couldn't keep track if we did it. So we don't always have a lot of sales, but we're having one now. So if you haven't seen, please take advantage of that, because that's always a nice kind of boost to the bottom line. We've had some cold weather come through. I'm sure a lot of you all um, who are up this way may have experienced that, and that can kind of throw a wrench in whether or not people come in. Um, it's so weird. It can't be too terrible, because if it's too terrible, people won't come in. It can't be too nice because people won't come in. So it has to be just the right balance of terrible and wonderful um, for people to come in. So there you go. Bonnie says, that's how we know your sales are legit. Well, we try. All right, I'm going to flip this around and we're going to jump right into it. I don't think there's anything else that I had to mention. Oh, I guess I should mention Jen's video tutorial. Hopefully you all had a chance to see that. That's on YouTube, the latest Saturday morning. I think they're filming right now. In theory, they're filming right now over at the cottage. She made a really lovely pair of earrings, and I hope people like that. I thought they were pretty cute. Um, and yeah, so there's that. Um, yeah, so I don't really have anything else to say on updates. Besides that, my tulips are blooming. Oh, we have an ornamental plum tree that's looking really beautiful this year. I'll post pictures on my personal um, Instagram feed, maybe. That's Andrew T. Thornton 100. I used to post everything at the same time, but then I talked with a business coach and they're like, you really like your cats and your flowers, but there's nothing about your artwork. And I had to scroll through for like days to find anything. And I was like, well, when it's gardening season, and they're like, you may want to have two different ones. So I have two different ones now. So basically, that means I don't post in either one now because I get distracted by it. But anyway, so I'm going to flip this around and then we can do a little progress report. Hopefully, you've been enjoying. I'm going to get rid of this banner so it doesn't clog up the bottom. Hopefully, you've been enjoying watching this process. I always learn something new every time I do it. So I definitely, whether it's working with a certain material or technique or kind of fleshing out ideas that I've had over the years. I think it's a nice kind of thing to do, and I like it. So hopefully you all have been enjoying them too. Usually I do updates like every hour, but then I wasn't actually getting anything done, and it would take me weeks to do stuff. So this way, they're spaced out a little bit more. If you didn't catch the 1 through 6, those are available on our YouTube channel. There maybe is a playlist. I think William put together a playlist so you can go through and check that out if you're interested. Lorraine says your flowers look beautiful. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I did a little bit of gardening um some of the one of the days, and it might have been before we went to the opening. Um, and I very aggressively on this bush, and I probably peeled it like my head. It's down to the skin, but yeah, hopefully that doesn't die. I don't think it will because it's probably an invasive species that was left here from the previous owner. And I've trimmed it back pretty aggressively before and it hasn't died. The reason why I did that is because when I walk by, it's always at eye level to be stabby time. And so I made it so that it would not take my eye out every time I passed by. So that was nice. Oh, and we've made a little bit of well, I'll actually save that update for the Star Cottage Studio Patreon, because that's a specific Star Cottage Studio update. So I'll save that for another day on there. All right, I'm gonna flip this around. All right. Marion says no flowers here yet. Well, that's a shame. All right, so I have been having fun playing with the gel press, and I've been making these kind of backgrounds. And the way, I don't know if I showed how to do this or not. Probably not, because you have to do these pretty fast. At least from me, the way that I do them, I have to do them pretty fast. And so I've been making these kind of swirly patterns, and it's with acrylic paint, so they are kind of glossy. And so what you do is you take and you put down a base layer on the gel press, and then you take kind of like a clay shaper or something that has a rounded off kind of smooth point, like a stylus, and then you draw your pattern in real quick, and then you do your print from that. And then sometimes you can go back over and do more. Generally speaking, if you're just going to have it that be the top, you do your scratch away technique, and then you let that dry, and then you do another coat, and use the brayer to add the coat on them, and then you do your press, and then it will peel up not only the fresh kind of wet layer, but the wet layer will help peel up the drier layer underneath. And I like to keep my press dirty, and I know that sounds kind of gross, but I think it adds a little bit more kind of like patina or character or whatever. So you'll get kind of random little splotches of dark this and a little dark that. And I think that's good. Like it makes them more interesting. But I don't work in a very clean and pristine way. I work in a very kind of messy and kind of grungy way. So I like these. Marion says, my gel press is on order. It's a lot of fun. I'm using it mostly for backgrounds and textures. A lot of times in my old collages, I would use images of textiles, like Japanese textiles, and I would use those in my collages and use washi paper and different things like that. And I think it's nice to be able to control um, the kind of the motifs, the colors, and the symbolism of your papers, even if you're using them as a collaged element. I think sometimes it's nice to have that added control, because sometimes you don't necessarily always have that when you're using papers or ephemera from a specific source. So this is a nice way to do that. And then I also will clean the rollers off on the other side, which is another kind of experiment that I would do, where I would kind of build up layers and then peel some of them off. So it's kind of cool. I was experimenting with text too. I don't know if you know this about me, but I don't like to throw stuff away. So if I can use something and reuse something, I will try to do that before I will pitch it. So sometimes I'll take things that were scheduled to go to the garbage and use these to make the backgrounds. And I was playing around with adding iridescent colors and paints. Um, and so, yeah. And this is, you can see, this is where I was cleaning off my brayer. But I've been having fun using this. It's been really fun to kind of experiment and play around with it, seeing how much is too much paint. Sometimes if you add too much paint, it creates this weird kind of seaweed-esque type um, kind of suction cupped effect. I don't know if you can see that or not on camera, but there is this texture, and it's very kind of, it's slightly rough. And so I've been playing around with that too, seeing how much paint to add with each layer. And then, of course, painting on top of things and what kind of paints do what, with the more fluid ones and the ones that don't dry as quickly. I will say that there is a brand of or a line that Golden creates called Open, and it has an extender in it. And sometimes that works for stuff, but I also made a huge mess with it. So, because it didn't dry the way I thought it would, and it made like all these splotches and stuff, which was kind of chaotic. Um, Lorraine says that's a cool effect. Sandra's tuning in. Hey, Sandra. All right, so I've made these backgrounds and I kind of described that. I'm not going to show that because I don't want to really get the gel press out, because I've got other things I'd rather show you. So I made these backgrounds. I'm not going to set these too far away because I'm going to give you what I've been working on. All right. So here are the ones that are closest to being finished. I might add to them. I may have to go in and give them a good iron again so that they are flat. Sometimes it's dangerous when you're using certain materials and adding heat to them because sometimes it can make the images disappear. One time I did this whole series of vintage stamps and I set them in resin. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to put these on this cookie sheet. I'm going to put them on top of the kiln. Um, and in theory, it's going to warm it up, which is going to make the resin kind of more watery, and the air bubbles are going to float to the surface and pop, and I'm not going to have any air bubbles. Well, they didn't have any air bubbles. However, the heat from the kiln ended up kind of cooking out the color on the stamps, and it was not they kind of all look like these like dirty kind of nothing. So that was a waste. And I don't actually know what I did with those. I probably pitched them, um, which says a lot. Either that or I dipped them in Attack and kind of begrudgingly clean them out. However, this is probably 15 years ago. So, well, actually, it's probably more like 13 years ago because we did this in the apartment over in when we lived in Bolivar. Anyway, so here's one of them. And for a while, I was struggling with what I was going to do because I was painting each one of these and it was taking so long. Um, it was taking over an hour and a half to add the base layers of the paint. And the goal is to make these as accessible as possible. And I just knew that if I did that, I would have to charge a lot of money for them. And I wanted to make it so that people could actually get these and not have to pay an arm and a leg to acquire them. And um, so yeah, I switched that up pretty quickly. So the thing that I did was I started using these gel press textures that I created, these papers for textures. And I also started using some vintage photos that I have been collecting over the years. So these are kind of, I'll show these. There's a little bit of a glare. Eventually, I'm going to go in and probably do a matte spray on top. But those are the ones that are the most finished right now. I may go in and adjust things. We'll see. I'm always noodling around with things. But I think sometimes it's good to just move on sometimes too, because you can get stuck. Here is a bunch that I just finished that I'm going to probably add another kind of a metallic layer at some point. I might keep some matte because I think some of them look nice that way. But I don't know. I think it's one of those things where I like to experiment. And so you never know what you're going to get. So these are the ones that are, I would say that these are, if these aren't done, they're most close to be done. And then these are the ones that are in between. And then I'll show you today how I get to just before this point. Bonnie says, I love the photos. I did some inkjet printer transfers onto acrylic paintings. I did. Oh, good. Yeah, so this is not that at all, but you could do that. There's a lot of different ways if you're going to do transfers. There's a really famous artist. His name is Robert Rauschenberg, and he's known for um, an acetone transfer where he would take the Xerox copies and put them down, and then you soak the back and you rub it. And in theory, that then transfers onto the bottom layer, and then you peel it up. There's also a technique where you print onto you don't use inkjet because that will bleed, but you do a coat of gel medium, and then you print backwards and you put it on, and then you soak the back, and then you scrub away the paper, and then you do that. But this is also not that. But so there's a lot of different ways that you can use ephemera or old pictures in your work. And how this connects to some of my earlier work is that I used to do these kind of pendants where I would take tintypes and cut the tintypes out and then set them behind like quartz crystals or things like that. And it would kind of give it a kind of a cool effect, I thought. And I regret, oh, and I did some where I set them with chandelier crystals, which was pretty cool. However, I didn't take very many pictures back then, or if I did, they somehow got lost um, in the early days of digital photography. And so there's a whole like year's worth of work that's just poof gone. And I guess I could try to contact the people that I sold them to and track them down, but or I could just make more. But anyway, so I think that that kind of full circles um into this kind of series. So I can show you. This is just one of my boxes of vintage photographs. that I collected over the years. And so I'm always on the lookout for different things. I'm not going to go through too much of it because they are a little bit fragile. And so I have to be a little bit mindful of that. But I have different boxes full of images. And so what we ended up doing is getting some images and then printing them out on a laser printer. One of the things that I've kind of did and to make them more standardized is we took a little template and put the faces within that template so that they would all be relatively the same size, so that they would have a little bit of consistency across the board, even if nothing else was consistent. And so then what I do is I take a relatively new X-Acto blade. I wish I had my self-healing mat, but I don't have my self-healing mat with me. And I don't know where it is. But so then I just use a relatively fresh X-Acto blade and cut them out. I'm using this as kind of a sketch, because you'll notice as I progress that my painting and my finished drawing or piece is going to look very different than the original image. And I kind of thought that was important because I don't want things to look too I don't know. I guess I I don't know. I think I wanted to use this as kind of like the base of these, but I didn't necessarily want to make it so that the people were recognizable. And maybe that's because I don't know. I don't want anybody to be like, "Oh, that's my grandma." Um, so yeah. So after, I mean, I could paint these one at a time. It would just add an extra layer of work, and it would make them take longer to do, which I guess it wouldn't take too much longer. But I think this adds a nice layer and brings that collage element back into play. All right, so I've got this background, um, and I've got to decide how I'm going to use this. So I've got a nice yellowish green background, kind of orangey tones. So if I want this to pop, I'll use a contrasting color. And I kind of like this for the color, the contrasting color. And then I'll take my pencil, and if I'm really particular, I'll trace it out and do plot points. I can also use, if I like the original image, I'll sometimes take little elements from the original image. So if I want that kind of beehive-esque updo that she's got going, I can kind of plan that into my look as well. I'm being very loose because these are very abstracted. But I do, and they're kind of like these amorphous kind of shapes, which are kind of fun. I think it's interesting when your eye starts seeing things like what is that, pareidolia or whatever it's called, where you start seeing shape faces in things like wood grain or in rocks. Um, and in my mind, I think that the mind does this wonderful thing where it fills in this visual information. So it's like if there's a pattern, our brain tells us certain things. Like if this is a blob on top of a head, people, when they see that, they read it as hair. or if you have a shape that's like, let me get it. So if you have a circle and then there's this, and then there's this, and then there's this, automatically the brain says face, because there's like this like eye hole shape and this mouth hole shape. So I think there's something interesting about that, where we play with these kind of iconic forms and our brain kind of fills in the rest. So that way you can have kind of abstracted imagery, but then also be able to, you don't actually have to do all the work to make it look a certain way. You don't have to flesh it out 100%, because the brain kind of fills in the gaps, and you start seeing shapes, and they kind of start, your brain does half the work. Anyway, so I'm going to cut this out wherever that was. Oh, here it is. And I'm just using my scissors. I don't need to be super precise with this. I can just kind of go about this in a loose way. And then, since this is acrylic, basically, there's a layer of acrylic. I take my water. It's kind of scuzzy water, and I just rub around the edges, and it removes the pencil lines. So it doesn't actually look like I couldn't keep within the lines. And then the added benefit of doing that is that sometimes you can kind of shade the outline. And it also gets ready for the gluing. Now, I can kind of play around also with the positioning of this. So if I want to change that look, I can change that look by changing the way that I orient it, so that I have a level of flexibility into a level of flexibility with what I'm doing. Because originally I had this marked out like this, and that's fine, but I kind of actually like it a little bit better like this. Like she's caught in the wind or something. So maybe I'll use it like that. Of course, I want to make sure that it'll fit on my piece, so I'm going to look at it like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of figure out the shape of the body. Again, I'm working very abstractly, so I'm not going to go and render each limb and articulate every single kind of body part. But I do want to have, a general form. And I kind of like this. As a reference to the original image, her dress has this really cool kind of stripe pattern. And I thought that was nice. It kind of married into this pattern. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of cut off the edge. And what I mean by that is I don't want to waste all of this paper, because then I have to go and make more, which is not a problem. But when you're in the groove, it's kind of hard to backtrack once you're kind of in the flow of things. So I cut off on the edge, and with my gel press, it leaves a white kind of border, white-ish border, because invariably paint kind of gets in there. And so I keep that for 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 now. So then I'll just adjust this and see how it looks. I may have to do a little bit of trimming. And it's always interesting to layer these up because sometimes, depending on how you layer it, it can change the way it looks. So if you put this and you put this on top, it kind of looks weird. It looks like her hair is coming down kind of weird. So you want that to be in the behind. So, and like where it will hit on because originally I had her neck fairly long. So it kind of looks like this when it's long. But I kind of am digging it a little bit shorter. And I can always trim and transfer things. Well, we'll just do a long neck. I like long necks. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do, I ran out of my PVA glue, but I had some of this acid-free Yes paste. This is a really cool product that some collage artists use. And it's really good for for a, for using a lot of different kind of papers, because not all papers like all glues, but this is good to get a lot of different materials. You can use a lot of different kinds of papers. Katie Dement, who was my paper making teacher, she showed me this product. There's a Japanese version, and it's made of like taro roots or something, and it's really cool. But I found that it's incredibly difficult to find. So I use this when I'm not mixing up my own concoctions. It is not you have to use a very light touch. It kind of feels weird. It's like I'm dipping my finger in like Vaseline or something. But and you only need a little bit. I mean, this stuff is very sticky and it kind of dries funny. So you kind of have to work with it and be aware of the qualities. It's not like you're using a regular glue necessarily. All right. So I've used this Yes paste to glue the face down onto the head. No, that wasn't the right words. Those are not the right words. I glued the head down to the neck using this. And then next I'm going to glue this down. So it's an orders of operation kind of business here. It's kind of like using a glue stick that is not in a stick form. It's just like there in the tub. And I did try to make some glue up using a little of this Yes paste with some other stuff, and it was kind of yuck. It turned all clumpy and like, who remembers GAC? It turned. I made this basically. I made my own kind of glue sludge, but it was not very practical. So, anyways, so this is what I'm doing for this. And yeah. And so I'm kind of tacking it down with this Yes paste. I like it. I use my fingers. Some people don't like to use their fingers while they're working, but I kind of do. I think for me, it's about getting in kind of contact with the piece, and so I don't have a problem with that. Some people don't like using their fingers, and You know, I can understand that. Sometimes it can be really gross, and I don't like to always do that too. One time I was beta testing this metal clay, and there were no instructions. They just gave it to us. And apparently, if you use certain types of like oils, because originally you use these different oils, it just basically melted the clay, and my whole hands were covered in this brown sludge, and I have these pristine white walls, and I couldn't exit the room. I was basically locked in, and I had to basically wait until William got home from work and then beg him to let me out of the room so I could wash my hands. So I'm just covering the back of this collaged element with the Yes paste, and you may notice that I am getting extra onto my base. And that's acting as two things. It's acting as kind of like a spill mat for whatever gets left over. And then number two, I'm not going to make this stick to my work surface. And so then I kind of position it so that this white border is kind of off of the edge. And I kind of have to be careful with this because at this point I can very easily rip this. And so I'm just going to make sure that I can kind of do this like so. And of course, I got a notification of something, and my fingers are all sticky now. And it's always helpful to have a paper towel situation or wet wipes lined up. And I have those. I have those. In theory, I have those. So the reason why I didn't cut this beforehand is because I pasted this down to this piece, and I'm going to actually wipe off any excess because I don't want this to gum up my scissor blades. And I'm going to take my scissors and chop this. Oh, I see Harry's on. Hey, Harry. All right. So this is this stage right now of this. All right, I'm going to cover this up. It's not going to dry out necessarily that quick, but just in case, never hurts. And then I'm going to take the hairdryer and dry it out a little bit so I can do the next step. Okay. One thing I am going to do is I've got this matte medium, and I'm going to do a light coat just over wherever I'm going to paint. Because, and I need to get some more because apparently I'm running low. And I probably should have got a brush that's a bigger brush than what I've got going on. This is not the ideal brush for it, but I don't want to run downstairs, so we're going to use what we got. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't necessarily like the way that the Yes Paste takes the acrylic. So this little layer here makes it a little bit easier to paint on top of. If you wanted to, you could use that clear gesso, but the clear gesso does have a tooth to it. So if you don't want this to be very extra, more texture than it already is, then this is good just to do that. Sometimes when I'm doing this and I've got this, I'm adding a layer to it, I can start building in contours into the paint and it kind of has a memory. So sometimes I'll go with the contours of the face, or if the hair is a certain way, I'll sometimes go over it in the direction that I want those kind of brush strokes. So even if I don't add more, it'll kind of subconsciously be there. And sometimes you can see it too. All right, I'm gonna dry this off again so I can paint. That's kind of dry. Normally when I'm working, I work on 6 or 7 at a time. And so um okay. Sorry about that. Apparently some of the destinations disconnected for some reason. So I had to reconnect those. Anyway, so I normally work on 6 or 7 of these at a time. I don't try to work on too many because I get overwhelmed if I have too many that I'm working on. So I don't necessarily use the hairdryer a ton. I let things dry kind of naturally, and then by the time I've gotten to the end of my little mini series, then I'm ready to like move on. All right, so I've got some uh, titanium white, and this is Golden brand acrylic paint. I've got some super fine brushes that I like to use for detail. And I've got my clean-ish water off to the side. It's actually really dirty, but I don't like to switch out the water too much while I'm working because I feel like it changes the light throughout the pieces. So not that that matters a ton, but so wherever there's highlights, I'm going to kind of create, um, I'm going to add some paint. And this is a little bit wet for my liking, the water, but that's fine. And so I'm just adding some highlights here and there. And this is how I can make it kind of like my own. So I'm not just cutting out an image and pasting it on, which is fine. But I want to make these kind of like my own. So in theory, the photographs are like a sketch, and I'm using that sketch to build the paint layers on top of. So this is not going to look anything like the original photograph that I used. it's gonna have its own kind of painterly effect. And I don't want to spend too much time on these, on all the different layers, because again, I want to keep these accessible and affordable. And the longer I spend working on these, the more I kind of have to charge. So I'm going to work pretty quickly for me because I work pretty slow generally. But I think this is also a good lesson in what's called grisaille painting. Grisaille painting is where you're painting kind of these gray layers, and you build up the layers of gray to understand kind of light and shadow in your portraiture or whatever you're painting. So that's a good technique in understanding like your highlights and your shadows. And I think it's a good exercise. So, um, and you can also distort the faces quite a bit depending on what you highlight and what you don't highlight, which I think is kind of interesting. Um, I think there's a lot of um, possibilities. Like if you wanted to change the facial structure completely, you could accentuate the cheekbones and pull them up higher or make the brow more intense. One thing you will notice while I'm doing this is that I'm very cognizant of the skull shape underneath. So I know this is the orbitals, uh, the uh, where the eyeball goes, the eyeball hole. Is it the orbicular or something? Or I can't remember. It's some kind of thing where this is recess. So I know that this is a shadow part. So I'm going to build up where I know there are highlights. So I know there's highlights on the brow. I know there's highlights on the cheekbone. I know there's a little bit of a highlight here on the bridge of the nose. I know that there is highlights around the mouth and the lips. And I also know that there are highlights on the very uh, little tippy tip of the chin. So you can actually see the skull shape this way. Um, you can see it. At least I can. I was trying to talk with a brush in my mouth. So if this is the face, and here's her face. So if this is the skull is here, we know that the eyeball is here, the eyeball holes are here, and you're gonna have this shape. So when the skull is forming, there's a ridge over here, and there are the cheekbones. It's kind of like the episode of MacGyver. Do y'all remember that where he finds a skull and then he has to recreate the face using erasers? And depending on the teeth, will also determine on the shape of the face too. Somebody has larger teeth. Generally speaking, this part will stick out more. And so there's usually a recessed area here. And you can see there's a recessed area here. And so, and then if the jaw flares out here, that's because of this. And So you can kind of see whenever you're dealing with a facial structure of where to hit the highlight. So if this is the skull underneath and these are kind of like the dark areas of the recessed areas, then on your piece, you'll know to hit the highlights here. If the light is coming from this direction, you'll hit the light here, 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 and you hit the highlights where the light's falling. All right. So that's kind of a really, really rush, not very specific anatomy lesson on facial structures and how that plays in on how light hits your subject matter. So with this, I'm going to continue fleshing out some of those highlights. And I just broke that rule. But what I'm doing here is where I'm adding this highlights is I'm going kind of around the edge, and that's in your mind, it's going to make that pop out a little bit more from the background. So I'm not going to make it too bright. I want this to still be dark, but I also want this to have a differentiation from this color here to this. So that's what I'm doing. It also allows me to fix anything. So if I've got, for example, in this print that we did, there's a great big line that goes through these faces. But with a little bit of paint, you know, they almost disappear completely. Um, and so that's another nice thing is that if you have an image that is imperfect, you can use the paint to help hide any kind of imperfections. Now, this isn't the greatest job because I'm just going the paint directly onto the paper, and you can already see it's kind of warping a little bit. But if I added more layers to this, I could make that line erase completely, and you would not even know it's there. All right, so that's one of the things that I do. And then when I'm happy with the highlights, I can also go in and add some shadows. And then that will help make it a little bit more of a dramatic image that has a little bit more, it, it'll look a little bit more three-dimensional in my mind. And so whether or not I keep these layers, it's always it's up to me. I think that that's one of the lovely things about creativity is that in life, so often we feel as though we don't have control over things. There are so many things that happen in this world that we don't really have a ton of power on our own to change. However, in our own little worlds that we create here, and that we make, we have complete control over how the light moves, how shadows fall, what we want to highlight, what we want to hide. So I think there's a beauty in that kind of knowledge of being able to change things. And then I think hopefully feel more empowered in the rest of our life to make those changes. However we need to make them. All right. So I've got this, I've got the highlights and some of the shadows. I'm going to blow dry this so I can move on to the next kind of stage. Making a cyclone in William's office. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some flesh color. So I've got my palette here, which is basically the lid of a Chinese food container. I've got this red, which I'm going to put just a drop of this red. And I've got this yellow, primary yellow. And I'm running out of some of my colors, so I have to dip inside. And I have raw umber, which is a brown color, a deep brown color. It's also the color that I use for some of the shading. So that kind of then will carry in that as well. So I've got these three colors here. I've got this red, this naf, naf, what is it? Phala, I don't know how to say that. It's a red color, like a primary red color, primary yellow, and a little bit of this raw umber. And I've also got some white. And this is that titanium white. And I'm going to use a little bit more of this white than I for any of the other colors. And then I'm going to mix these up. And basically that this has a little bit of green in it, and that kind of makes this kind of like pinkish color. And when you think about skin colors, sometimes you have to think about blood also. And I know that that's kind of like a weird thing to think about. But when you're thinking about skin colors, you have to think about blood. And the reason why is because a lot of times you can see somebody's blood underneath their skin, and that changes the hue of their skin tone. So if somebody is incredibly fair, sometimes they've been running or something, you can see that blood, that pink color, on their cheeks, and they become flushed. So if you want to, if you have a darker complexion of somebody who is not Caucasian, you can use some burnt sienna, a little bit of that in there. And that can help add some of that melanin into the skin. And you can also use a little bit of this Gumnut said that she has a problem with her parcel. You know, if you have a problem with your orders, the best and easiest place to get information about that is to email us at info@allegorygallery.com. Because for one, I don't do any of the shipping, so I have no control over that. And number two, it's super distracting because then I start thinking about how these packages get lost or where they could have gone or what could have happened. And so I'm just going to say this now. If you ever have any concerns about that, it's always best to go directly to the source which is the email, and then there's a paper trail. Because the other thing about this is, while I'm working, I'm not going to necessarily remember this to tell William, so or Barb, or to follow up. So I always highly encourage everybody to, if they ever have any issues or problems with any of their orders, to email the uh, uh, email address, because that's the best and easiest way. Otherwise, it's just super distracting, and it takes away from my focus. So that's just a heads up. All right. So another thing that I can do to add a little bit of color is there's this nickel azo gold, which is a gold color. It looks like a ruddy kind of rusty brown, but it's actually kind of this beautiful gold, which makes up a lovely tone for the like a flesh tone. So so the other thing that we can do is, I'm thinking about highlights and shadows. So I'm going to add white off to the side here, and I can use that to mix the colors and add highlights to my color palette. And then the trick about this is getting this matte medium. And I've got this here like so. And I'm putting this off to the side. Notice I'm not working in great big mixes of colors. And the reason why is because if I make a huge mix of this color, I may not like it. And then I'm stuck with a ton of it. So I'm just going to kind of water this down with this matte medium. For one, it's going to add a little bit of translucency to my piece, or to my color. And I'm going to add a little bit more of this raw umber to it to kind of bring some of that brown kind of nuttiness back into the skin. And I'm going to just work until I get the right kind of color that I want. And I'm working in a translucent layer. I don't want this to be super super opaque, because I'm going to be working on top of that kind of grisaille layer that I put down earlier. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit more of that red, and it's going to make kind of that kind of warmer flesh tone. And I'm going to bring this up so you can see it a little bit closer. All right. So these are the kind of base layers that I'm going to work with my flesh tone. And I kind of have to work quick because I do have the windows open, and that is going to make these paints dry out quicker. So I don't want these to dry out. I know some acrylic artists, what they do is they keep a water mister, a water bottle that's a mister. And what they'll do with that is they'll give it a squirt every once in a while. I kind of find that that's hard to control sometimes, so I don't like to do that. But I also probably waste more paint than they do. But I also don't work in as big of a quantity of paint. So I don't know. You kind of have to roll with it and see what works. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of work in there work in the shadow areas first. Go over the shadows first. And then kind of go back over and thin out these the colors or the paint layer. All right. So this is how I'm going to do this, is I'm going to add these thin layers and build up those flesh tones. And it may not look like anything at first because we're working on top of that gray kind of layer. But I hope you can start seeing how that translucency is building up and creating that sense of flesh. And again, I'm not being super if I was working on a much larger painting, then I would maybe add many more layers to this. But since this is kind of a looser version of my paintings, I'm just going to add a few layers of this flesh tone and then use that to work with my piece. So what do you all think about that? I don't know how other people do their flesh tones. This is just one way. And depending on the style, there's an artist named Titian, and he would start with kind of a brick red background, especially when he would do flesh tones. And then that would give kind of a warmth to his people. All right, I'm just gonna go and put a little bit more, dry this. I'm not gonna dry this like this, because if I dry this like this, I'm gonna dry out my paint. And then I can add more layers on top of that. And then what I'm going to do is I can always add highlights back in to my piece. So I've got my piece here, and I've added these kind of translucent flesh tones. And then I can always take, and if I want to bring out some of those highlights, get some of that white back out and increase some of the highlights that way as well. So I can go back in and mix that up like so. And I mean, this is literally like watching paint drying, y'all. We're gonna have happy accidents and all that fun stuff. So basically, I just add layers until I'm happy and kind of have that stopping point. And like I said, this is very different than the original image that we started with. You can scroll back if you're watching on YouTube and see the kind of the original image that we worked with from. And I have no idea of the coloring of that person. I have no idea of how they looked in real life. And I don't necessarily want to duplicate that exactly. I want to have that kind of that, I don't want to say freshness, but I want my kind of creativity to shine through. And so that's one of the ways that I'm going to be doing the, I've added my kind of like painterly touch to these pieces is by adding these different layers of flesh colors and bringing out highlights and shadows. And some of these I'll add more layers, and some of them will have more translucent layers, I think. And that will give it kind of, it will have its own kind of look to it. Now, along with working on highlights, I also have to think about shadows. So whenever I'm doing these, it's kind of a push and pull between shadows and highlights. So if I've got these and I've built this up, it kind of turns into this blob, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a darker color to make certain things pop more. I'm going to outline certain shapes, and that will help define certain things that I want to make um, a little bit more, I don't know, to pop out more. So if I've got the lines of the mouth, I'm gonna work on that and kind of build those out a little bit. And then the iris or the pupils of the eyes, and just small things like that will dramatically change the look and bring things out. You can also mess things up pretty good doing that. But I think it's a good way to kind of carve out certain shapes in the face. And it kind of looks like she's got a goatee, so I might go over that with a little bit of that paint. Um, and I think that's a nice, I'm happy with the direction that this is going. I think it's one of those things where sometimes you can get lost in how much or what you can do. There's so many different things and options that you can do. Um, and I think that sometimes that can be overwhelming. So sometimes it's nice to have little points that you can draw from and go from there. They kind of help anchor your process. And that goes for a lot of things. Like if you're stuck creatively, sometimes I feel that when you're making jewelry, for example, like sometimes I think it's fun to get some things out and play around with them, move them around on your design board and kind of pick things that you kind of want to work with, but you may not know what you're going to do with exactly, and see them in different relationships. And I think that that's always nice. It's a good way to kind of ground yourself in that process. Um, so, yeah. So basically, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to continue to add some of these highlights and shadows to this piece, outlining it so it's a little bit differentiated from the background. If I need to do anything where I'm going to add any like details, I might wait to do those until later. And then that way I can if I need to add any details, I'll do those later because I want to bring this all up to a certain point, and then I'm not going to keep erasing the work that I've put in, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to spend all this time noodling around on an eye and then go over it with a shadow and then completely erase that hard work. So I'm just going to kind of mess around with these layers. I'm going to start thinking about how to incorporate this with my background. So I've talked a little bit about creating this figure and putting this figure on the background, but I haven't really talked about the relationship between the figure and the background. And I've done it subconsciously by using similar techniques in creating these papers for the body and the hair with the gel press and the background with the gel press and different collage elements. So there is some commonality there. But if I want to, I can look at certain colors in the forms and I can bring those up. So I know I can see that there are these kind of honey colors in the form here. And those honey colors are also throughout here. And I can take some of this Azo Gold, for example, exemplar, and take some of that and go in here and do a quick little wash here and bring some of that warmth down into the piece. And I can also do a wash on top of the clothes here. And there's just little things like that that I think can kind of create a visual harmony in your piece if that's the thing that you're looking for. I think I might tend towards going towards, I don't know, I kind of like that kind of green and violet look. Green and violet creates, when you mix those colors together, it creates this very beautiful gray color. And I think that that plays off of some of that kind of vintage photograph that we used earlier to create the base layer. So yeah. So we'll see. Also, if I change my mind, I can always paint over it. Or if I change my mind quick enough, I can take and put the water and dab that on there and then kind of scrub it off. Like if I don't like that, I can dilute this a lot with water and then wipe it off. Which I actually did like that. So it's kind of foolish that I did that. But you don't get it off 100%, but you do get it off more than not. So if you want to work on doing that, you can definitely do that. All right. It's so much easier on Instagram when these are like in a fast forward, right? You see it and then you blink and then it's done. And then in real life, it actually takes a long time. But yeah. All right. So I'm pretty much done for the moment. I'm getting a little bit hungry. So I think I'm going to maybe whip up some dinner. And I'm going to get back to work. And then maybe tomorrow I'll do a quick pop on sometime in the day or maybe during Williams Live and show you how this turned out so you can see the results. What do y'all think about that? All right. Jermaine says, I find it so fascinating to watch your process. Thanks, Jermaine. I find that my process is one that's always evolving, but I circle back to some of the similar things over and over. And it's a real honor to be able to share this with all of you out there watching. As an artist, it can be very isolating sometimes when you're alone in your studio and you are kind of just stuck with the voices in your head. Or in my case, the voices of the book on tape that I'm listening to, which I just finished The Change by Kirsten Miller, which was kind of difficult to re-listen to, but also by the end kind of empowering. Um, and I just started the book Woman's Daughter, which is the sequel to one of our book club books. And let me just tell y'all, the second book, poor cussy Mary, she gets her something gets busted up within the first like 2 seconds of the book. I'm like, can this lady get a break? Isn't her life hard enough? But anyways, so I feel very appreciative of the ability to share this with all of you out there. I know that this may not be right for everyone. I know that a lot of the stuff that we're mostly known for is our beading, and people like to see the gemstones and the beads, and but I kind of feel like all of these are connected. And I also feel like the more things that we do, the more it informs our other kind of crafts and our other technical skills. And so when we play with paint, and you don't necessarily have to be good at being a painter or drawing or whatever, but the more that we do, the more it informs our other things. So if we know how to mix color with paint, then when we're working with beads, then it's another thing that we can do. And we can employ those skills and those kind of sensibilities that we've honed through this other media onto our jewelry, for example. The nice thing about these are is that I can also, if I want to experiment with designs, I can paint them onto my characters. Why not? I can have fun kind of experimenting with different things that have been kind of percolating in my mind. I did a painting a few years ago, and I think it was called The Magic Keeper, and our friend Ann Schroeder, she liked it, and she made her version of one of the necklaces that the character was wearing. So I thought that was really cool. And I always love it when, art can inspire art, and we can use those vehicles that we have available to us to kind of create more things and add more beauty to this world. I think it's a really special and important thing to create a world which we want to be a part of. And yeah, so I think we're all doing that together. Um, oh, Marianne says she just finished The Witch's Night. Oh, good. I need to catch up on some of my book club books, to be honest. There's a couple ones that I've been dragging my feet on, and I just need to push through them. But, anyways, so I will check back in with you all maybe tomorrow. I would say tonight, but I don't really know how much steam I have tonight, so we'll see. And then, yeah, you'll get to see how this kind of panned out, and then you'll see whatever other pieces that I finish and how I embellish these pieces. All right. I hope you all have a great evening, and that if you haven't taken advantage of our coupon code in our online store, the coupon code is new site, and you can save 20% off your order. And yeah, so if you're interested in taking advantage of that, we would greatly appreciate it. My goal is to hopefully get these up before the sale ends. And then that way you can save a little bit on these as well. I don't know how quickly I can work those, so we'll see how much I get done before the sale ends. But yeah, if you are so inclined, we would be greatly appreciated. We would greatly appreciate your support. So thank you so much. And as always, we're so grateful for all of you who watch these videos, who like them, who share them, who interact and comment and make this a really enjoyable and supportive community that is fun to be a part of. I know some of the other communities out there, they're very negative and there's always complaining and there's always a lot of like negative mindsets. And, while that may exist in the world, I think it's really beautiful that we're able to support one another with these kind of golden moments with each other where we hold each other up and root each other on and help each other grow and learn and develop. So, anyways, I'll get off my soapbox, y'all, and start working on dinner. All right. Have a great night, everybody. See ya.